can you just lay out the case, the rationale for the original action that President Trump took against Iran, why it was urgent to do this now, what the objectives were, and which objectives have been met, in your view?
Sure. I think we had two main things going on. Number one, on the missile program, I think the president saw intelligence, along with the Israelis, that the Iranians were racing forward on their advanced long-range missile programs, potentially with some support from the Chinese. We had seen back in December, the Wall Street Journal had an exclusive story about a raid, a special forces raid of a vessel on the high seas that was bringing technology in for the Iranian missile program. We know that, as you saw, the missile that was shot off against Diego Garcia, they have already intermediate range ballistic missiles. They were working through a space launch vehicle program for intercontinental ballistic missiles. At the same time, while we did have great success in Operation Midnight Hammer last year against the nuclear sites, especially Fordo, there is enriched uranium that was moved to Isfahan tunnels. That highly enriched uranium appears to be intact. At the same time, there was a facility deeper than Fordo continuing to make progress towards completion. We call that Pickaxe Mountain. Of course, there are other aspects of the weaponization program we think we're moving forward through a secret organization called SPND. What have they accomplished so far after the major military operations in Epic Fury? It looks like they've laid waste to about 70% of Iran's missile stockpiles, some high percentage of launchers, destroyed some number of missile cities, the deep underground bunkers, but not all of them. Certainly their upstream industrial base to make missiles, especially the long-range missiles, appears to be destroyed. So a lot of the threat from the missile side, either degraded or destroyed, probably a generational setback on their missile program. A lot of nuclear sites hit, especially those SPND secret sites that appeared to be R&D research labs, scientists. But in the end, we don't have the enriched uranium material out of Isfahan, and Pickaxe Mountain has not been dismantled. So those are two on the not done yet list, potentially not achievable from the air and sea. And so then the president would say, okay, what's my best option if I've achieved all the other military target sets we set out with? And of course, they've listed air defense and the Navy, that you've heard about the overall defense industrial base, all of those great accomplishments. Then the question is, what's the best way to achieve that which you may not be able to achieve from the air? And that's the point you would switch to both that mission set and the Strait of Hormuz. And I think that's what we're seeing right now.
So in summary, would you say that it's open to debate? Can there be differing opinions on whether it was completely necessary to embark on what could be a difficult and protracted, we're not calling it a war, but an excursion, an encounter into this? You would say, if the president had asked you beforehand, you would have said, go for it, or you would have said, well, let's see what else we can accomplish?
Well, I was pretty publicly in favor of what the president did here since January. And my view was, if we still face an imminent nuclear threat and we face a looming imminent missile threat, both direct national interest to the United States, the question would then be, when do you want to confront those threats? Do you want to do it when they're strongest? When China says, hey, close the strait? You want to do it when they've actually achieved the nuclear weapon or when they have the ICBM? Or do you want to do it when they're at their potentially weakest point? And so when you saw in January, millions of people come onto the streets, maximum violence against them, 50,000 or more people gunned down in the streets, that's not a sign of a very strong regime. Remember, end of the year last year, they had two crises going on. One, started rationing gasoline. They've been importing gasoline again, which they hadn't done for about 20 years. And two, they started having a banking crisis. One bank collapsed, 5 more teetering on the verge of collapse. That seemed to be the moment to seize. If you have an imminent threat, it's a clear national interest, and your adversary is at its weakest point, that'd be a good time to do something. And so I think the president chose the right time on his timeline, not on their timeline, not on China's timeline, not on Russia's timeline. And he's done great damage to both the missile and nuclear program, but obviously still some things to achieve.
Richard, it's Kelly here. Just to pick up on that point, you know, the economy, as you guys have also documented, is terrible. And now we have, you think, 13 days after they would, without exports, they'd have to start shutting in production. The Revolutionary Guard siphons half of the oil revenues. The currency's fallen by 93%. The inflation situation is out of control. So we're pushing this economy to the brink of collapse to bring them to the table. But again, them is now a regime that is probably more hardline. So what does a more hardline regime with less revenue, less missile capability, what are its options? What are the options for Iran now?
Yeah, I think if we remember historically, I mean, in the first Supreme Leader's era, in the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, Khamenei, had a very famous speech where basically Iran gave up and said, okay, we've lost this war. We're going to stop now. We're going to drink from the poison chalice, was the term of art. Basically, there is a point at which they have to be pragmatic that they're going to lose control of the regime, that they can't run the economy, they can't manage anything anymore. The banks will collapse. The people are not going to get paid. The IRGC will not get paid. And so if they're facing imminent economic collapse, and we've seen leaked reports that President Pezeshkian, who's sort of, a figurehead there installed by the regime, the previous regime, that, saying, hey, we can't make it a few more weeks. Now you add on the blockade, as you're saying, the export of oil now grinded to a halt, the import of gasoline grinded to a halt, the impact on prices inside the country. This is dramatic. So they will have to make a choice. They've tested the blockade over the last 24, 36 hours. I assume they will continue to try to test it. If they cannot get through the blockade, that so far doesn't seem they've been able to, then they have a choice. Do they escalate militarily? Do they target Saudi Arabia? Do they target the East-West pipeline? Do they try to coax the Houthis into this war, which they have been unable to do to this point, which I think is telling? Or do they say, let's go back to Islamabad, let's talk about the enriched uranium?
Richard,
I think the president's hoping for the latter.
Richard, with we were talking about how dangerous the new regime is, even perhaps as bad or even worse than the guys that are dead now. Can they still be a major threat in the region with what they have left, and still a major threat to the United States at this point?
Well, I would caution us to say we don't really know who's in charge there. We think we know. It's certainly not Mojtaba Khamenei. That guy, it seems to be weakened at Bernie's, frankly. I think you have this guy who's supposedly the supreme leader. He's behind some room, maybe on a ventilator or something. And, the B-teamers who are still alive have gotten together to say, let's run the country and say we're doing it on behalf of a supreme leader so everybody follows our orders. That's how it feels to me at the moment. So I don't know what they'll choose to do. Okay. Will they be a threat in the future, even if this comes to a halt? If these are hardliners, that believe in the Islamic Revolution and want to destroy America, want to destroy the West, sure, they'll seek to reconstitute in the future. It's going to take them years upon years. They'll still retain their short-range ballistic missiles that you've seen. Remember, I said that it appears we've destroyed about 70% of their missiles. That leaves 30% left down in those missile cities that we have not been able to get to through our munitions based on how deep underground they are. But at the same time, they won't be able to rebuild their air defense anytime soon. If we see a threat, we can go get it. The Israelis can go get it. They'll be in a much far weakened position than they have